Daddy, why is she sleeping out here? The little girl's voice was a soft whisper against the city's festive roar. Her millionaire father, a man who had built an empire but lost his heart, brought her home on Christmas Eve. Snowflakes, like tiny crystalline dancers, descended upon New York, each one catching the incandescent glow of the city's holiday lights. The avenues thrummed with a vibrant, joyful energy. Families, cocooned in thick scarves and heavy coats, laughed as they passed, their breath fogging in the frigid air. Couples stole kisses beneath garlands of twinkling bulbs, and children's excited shouts echoed as they pointed at elaborate window displays filled with animatronic elves and stoic, felt antler reindeer. The sleek, black Aston Martin DBX glided to a halt beside a desolate bus stop, a quiet island just a stone's throw from the dazzling spectacle of the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Julian Croft emerged first, his presence as sharp and defined as the tailored lines of his dark cashmere overcoat. He was a man of immense stature, not just in height, but in the aura of quiet authority that surrounded him. He extended a gloved hand, and a little girl with hair like spun gold leaped from the plush leather interior into a fresh dusting of snow. "Stay close, my little star," he murmured, his voice a low rumble as he adjusted her cream-colored knit hat. "We'll see the big tree, then it's straight home for hot cocoa." "Okay, Daddy, okay?" Lily beamed, her small mitten-clad hand squeezing his tightly. The city felt enchanted that night. Christmas Eve always wove a special kind of magic. Yet, Julian's gaze was distant, his eyes reflecting the million lights, but absorbing none of their warmth. It had been 2 years since the accident, 2 years since Amelia was stolen from them. He wore a smile for Lily, a carefully constructed mask, but the hollow ache in his chest was a constant, unwelcome companion. They ambled past glowing storefronts, Lily's bright chatter a melody of Santa Claus, reindeer, and the precise number of cookies required to satisfy a man of his legendary appetite. But then, her steps faltered, her voice dropped to a hush. "Daddy, why is that lady sleeping there?" Julian followed her gaze to an old, weathered wooden bench at the edge of the bus stop. Curled beneath the flickering, indifferent glow of the route map was a young woman. She couldn't have been much older than 20. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess, threaded with melting snowflakes. She was clad in a pale, threadbare sweater that offered little protection against the biting cold. In her trembling arms, she cradled something, a small bundle held tight against her chest. Julian took a half-step closer, his eyes narrowing. It was a baby, swaddled in a thin, frayed blanket. The infant was terrifyingly still, its cheeks a raw, angry red from the frost, tiny fingers peeking out, trembling in the relentless wind. A vice gripped Julian's heart. His first instinct, a primal urge to protect his own, was to pull Lily's hand and walk away. They were strangers. The city was an ocean of stories you couldn't possibly hope to save. But Lily resisted, her small hand pulling back. "Daddy," she insisted, her voice firmer now, her eyes wide with child's pure, undiluted empathy. "She has a baby. He's so little, Daddy. He must be so cold." Julian looked down at his daughter. Her small face was a portrait of earnest concern, a plea etched into every innocent feature. He hesitated, his breath a white cloud in the frosty air, his mind a battlefield between cold logic and a sudden, surging tide of emotion. And in that moment, something within him fractured. Without a word, he knelt, his movements slow and deliberate, and began to unwind the soft, crimson scarf from Lily's neck. She watched, silent, as her father approached the sleeping woman. Kneeling beside the bench, Julian gently, carefully, laid the warm scarf over baby, taking care not to disturb them. The infant stirred, its lips parting in a silent, dreaming suckle. Julian's gaze shifted to the young woman. Her skin was pallid, a faint blue tint coloring the edges of her lips. Her arms clutched the child tighter. Even in her unconscious state, a fierce, maternal instinct that defied the cold. He reached out and touched her shoulder, a light, hesitant contact. "Miss," he said, his voice low but laced with urgency. "Miss, you can't stay out here tonight." She didn't stir. Julian leaned closer, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. His voice broke just slightly. "Please wake up." The wind howled a little louder then, a mournful sound that seemed to cut right through him. In the distance, the faint, angelic voices of carolers drifted on the air, singing Silent Night. But nothing about this moment was silent. It was screaming with desperation. He glanced back at Lily, who was watching him not with fear, but with profound, unwavering hope. That was all the catalyst he needed. He turned back to young woman, his features hardening with a newfound resolve. "You're coming with us," he whispered, a vow made to her, to himself, to the ghost of a promise he'd made long ago. Elara Vance awoke with a violent panic jolt. The cold was the first thing to register, a sharp, invasive force that seemed to have settled deep in her bones. Then came the familiar, gut-wrenching fear. Her arms instinctively tightened around the bundle on her chest. Her baby. Her eyes flew open. Snow was falling in thick, heavy curtains now. Her back was a chorus of aches from the frozen bench. But what sent a surge of pure terror through her was a tall, imposing man kneeling beside her. The scent of expensive cologne and the city's electric energy clung to him. He was dressed in a coat that cost more than she'd seen in a year, and he was holding her baby. "No!" she cried, lunging with a strength born of desperation. "Give him back." The man didn't even flinch. His voice was calm, steady. "He's freezing. You need to come inside." She struggled to her feet, her legs shaking uncontrollably. "I don't need your pity." Julian Croft studied her. Young, so young. Her blonde hair was matted with frost. Her lips chapped and cracked. Her sweater was stretched thin, a pathetic shield against the elements. But it was her eyes that captured him, a tempest of defiance, desperation, and soul-deep exhaustion. The baby stirred a weak, fragile movement. Julian adjusted the scarf, his daughter's scarf, around the infant's tiny body. The child's skin was translucent, his lips tinged with blue. "I'm not offering pity," he said, his voice devoid of condescension. "I'm offering warmth." Elara's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back with fierce pride. People only help when they want something. I've learned that lesson well. A vicious gust of wind tore through them. The baby let out a faint, wheezing cough. Then another. Julian stood, holding the infant closer. "You can come, or you can stay, but I'm not leaving him to freeze to death." For a long, agonizing moment, Elara was paralyzed. Her arms ached with the need to hold her son. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to snatch him back, to run, to disappear back into the anonymous cruelty of the city. But something in the man's eyes held her captive. They weren't cruel. They weren't predatory. They were kind, the eyes of a father. She took a single, hesitant step forward. "His name is Leo," she whispered, the name a prayer on her lips. Julian nodded. "I'm Julian. My car is just here." She glanced down at her soaked, worn-out shoes, then back at her baby, swaddled in a scarf that wasn't his, held by a man she didn't know. But her feet began to move. She followed. Inside the Aston Martin, the world felt surreal. It was warm, silent, opulent. Elara curled into the plush leather of the back seat, her eyes tracking every move as Julian adjusted Leo's blanket. A little girl with wide, curious eyes peeked over the seat at her. "She's so young," Elara murmured, more to herself than anyone. "She's 4, Julian replied, his gaze meeting hers in the rear-view mirror. "Her name's Lily." Elara nodded. "She's beautiful." A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Lily's soft voice broke it. "What's your baby's name?" "Lo," Elara said. Lily smiled. "He's really tiny, like a snowflake." Julian's eyes flicked to the mirror again. Elara was staring out the window, alone, unshed tears shimmering on her lashes. Elara had once believed in happily ever afters, before her world had shattered. She'd been a promising art student, her professors lauding her unique ability to capture emotion in charcoal and paint. Then came the boy, the empty promises, the life-altering mistake, the positive pregnancy test. When she told him, he vanished. When she told her strict, unyielding family, they presented her with an ultimatum. "You have brought shame upon this house," her mother had said, her voice like steel. "If you keep it, you leave." She left, With no job, no money, and no support system, she was adrift. All she had was a child she hadn't been ready for, but one she could never abandon. She had bounced between shelters until they were full, then to the streets. Every scrap of food, every ounce of warmth went to Leo. Every night was a desperate battle for survival. Christmas Eve was just another night to endure, until now. As the car glided through the snow-dusted streets, Elara's quiet voice broke the silence. "Why did you stop?" Julian didn't answer immediately. He thought of Lily, of the overwhelming, terrifying weight of responsibility he felt the moment he first held her after the accident. He thought of the suffocating silence that had filled their home for 2 long years, the grief a heavy shroud he couldn't seem to cast off. "I suppose," he said finally, his voice thoughtful, "someone once told me that if you have the ability to help and you choose not to, it's no different than causing to harm yourself." Elara looked at him. He was the kind of man she had learned to fear, powerful, wealthy, untouchable. But there was something else there, something beneath the bespoke suit and the luxury car. It was in his voice, not a belief in her, but a steadfast belief in doing what was right. She looked at Leo, now sleeping peacefully in the arms of a stranger, wrapped in a child's scarf, his breathing already easier. For the first time in months, the crushing weight on her chest eased just a little. She leaned back against the seat, her arms still curled in her lap as if she were holding Leo. Julian glanced at her one last time in the mirror. He didn't smile, but a subtle softening transformed his features. And for the first time in 2 years, Christmas Eve felt different. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, a space so grand it stole Elara's breath. Warm, recessed lighting spilled across gleaming hardwood floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, glittering view with a snow-swept skyline. In the corner, a magnificent Christmas tree soared towards the ceiling, adorned with shimmering gold and crimson ornaments. It was a scene from a fantasy. Julian stepped out, still carrying Leo. Lily skipped ahead, her voice bright. "Come on, this can be your room, baby Leo." She vanished into a guest room, switching on a soft nightlight that cast a gentle lunar glow. A small, elegant bassinet stood in the corner, a relic from Lily's infancy, but immaculate. Elara hovered in the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, a physical barrier against this overwhelming kindness. She didn't step inside. Julian noticed. "You're safe here," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Take the room. Get some rest. We'll figure things out in the morning." Elara managed a small, shaky nod. Once he was gone, she sat on the edge of the plush bed, still wearing her coat. After a long moment, she tenderly laid Leo in the bassinet and sat beside him, one hand resting protectively on his small chest. It was the first night in a very long time that she didn't sleep with one eye open. The next morning, Elara was up before the sun. She found the laundry room and washed her sweater and Leo's blanket, tried to erase the faint, lingering scent of the street. In the pristine kitchen, she wiped down the already spotless counters and prepared a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. She was rinsing the dishes when Julian entered, wrapped in a silk robe. "You're up early," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. Elara shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "I work for what I'm given. Always." He studied her for a moment. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a quiet, unshakable dignity. "I'll make the coffee," he said. Later that morning, Mrs. Eleanor Finch arrived. She had been the Carter family's housekeeper for over a decade, a woman of practicality, sharp intuition, and unwavering loyalty. She immediately registered the extra dish in the drying rack, the unfamiliar footprints in the hall, the faint, sweet scent of baby powder. She found Julian in his study. "Sir," she began, her tone discreet, "it seems we have a guest." Julian nodded, not looking up from his book. "Her name is Elara. She and her baby will be staying for a while." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "You don't know her, sir. What if she's an opportunist? It happens, especially to men of your standing." Julian closed his book with a soft snap. She was sleeping on a bus stop bench with her infant son, in a snowstorm. "I highly doubt this is an elaborate scam." "Even so," Eleanor pressed, her concern genuine, "kindness should have its limits." especially with Lily in the house. Neither of them saw Elara standing in the hallway, a clean towel in her hands. She had heard every word, without a sound. She retreated to the guest room and quietly began to pack her meager belongings. She dressed Leo with trembling hands, folding the precious blanket and wrapping it tightly around him. "Let's go, my love," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Before we overstay our welcome." She opened the bedroom door and stepped into the hall, only to have Lily come running, colliding with her and wrapping her arms tightly around Elara's legs. "Please don't go," the little girl cried, her face buried in Elara's coat. "Mommy always said helping others is the best gift. You and Leo are our Christmas gift." Elara froze, her heart constricting. Then she heard footsteps. She looked up to see Julian standing at the end of the hall, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He had heard it all. Eleanor's well-intentioned doubts, Elara's silent retreat, Lily's heartfelt plea. And in that instant, he was transported back to a sterile hospital room 2 years ago, holding his wife's hand as she whispered her final words to him. "Be kind, Julian, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He swallowed past a lump in his throat, his voice soft but clear. "You're not using us, Elara. You're doing everything but..." She stood motionless, a statue of pride and pain, clutching her child. Julian stepped forward. "Please, stay." The days that followed Christmas unfolded in a gentle rhythm, wrapped in the soft melodies of classical music and the warm glow of the fireplace. A kind of peace Elara hadn't known was possible. She found her sanctuary in the sunroom, a quiet space with towering windows that offered a snow-dusted panorama of Central Park. Julian had once used it as a reading nook, but it quickly transformed into Elara's studio. In a forgotten cabinet, she discovered a treasure trove of old art supplies, charcoal sticks, sketch pads, sable brushes. When she asked if she could use them, Julian's voice was quiet. "They were my wife's. Amelia used to paint in here." Lily became Elara's constant companion, dragging her blanket and a mug of cocoa into the sunroom each morning. "Can you draw a dragon? Can you draw me with wings? Can you draw Daddy with a funny hat?" Elara would laugh, a sound that was becoming less fragile each day, and her hands would fly across the paper, quick and sure. One morning, however, Lily sat quietly, just watching Elara, her usual stream of requests replaced by a thoughtful silence. Elara didn't press. She just began to draw. That evening, Julian came home to find Lily bursting with excitement. "Elara made you something," she announced, "but you can't see it until after dinner." Later in the sunroom, as Elara was tidying her sketches, Lily presented Julian with a folded piece of paper. He opened it and froze. It was a charcoal sketch of him and Lily beside the Rockefeller Christmas tree. He was kneeling, tying her shoelace, and Lily was looking up at him, her tiny hand resting on his shoulder. The warm glow of the lights surrounded them like a halo. Julian stared at it for a long, silent moment. "I didn't even realize you saw that," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Elara, standing near the window, spoke softly. "I noticed things people have forgotten how to see." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and in that shared glance, something profound and unspoken passed between them. A few nights later, over breakfast, Julian looked up from his coffee. "There's a charity gala this weekend. I was wondering if you would accompany me." Elara blinked, startled. "Me?" He offered a small, hesitant smile. "You'd be saving me from an endless parade of tedious conversations." She hesitated. "I don't exactly have a ball gown hanging in my closet. We can take care of that," he said simply. On the night of the event, Elara was a vision. She wore a deep emerald green gown, its simple, elegant lines accentuating her grace. Her hair was styled in loose curls that framed her face. The only piece of jewelry she wore was a delicate silver pendant, one Lily had insisted she borrow. As they stepped into the glittering ballroom, Elara felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. She stayed close to the edge of the room, a quiet observer in a sea of noise. Julian introduced her to a few colleagues. She smiled politely and nodded, but mostly kept to herself. Later, as she stood near the dessert table, a glass of untouched champagne in her hand. A woman's sharp, condescending voice cut through the din. "Well, if it isn't the Christmas charity case, all dolled up." Elara turned slowly. The woman was tall, impeccably dressed, and her smile was as sharp as broken glass. "I knew I recognized you," she continued, her voice dripping with malice. "You were the one on 48th and 7th, weren't you? Sleeping on a bench with a baby. It's a sweet little rags to riches story. I bet it makes for great press." Elara's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, but her expression remained a calm, unreadable mask. She didn't offer a single word in her defense. She simply turned and walked out of the ballroom, out into the cold, snowy night. Julian found her minutes later, standing beneath the soft glow of a street lamp, snowflakes gathering like tiny jewels in her hair. She didn't turn as he approached. "You didn't have to come after me," she said, her voice quiet. "Yes," he replied, his voice firm. "I did." He slipped off his tuxedo jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You didn't deserve that," he said gently. "You never have to explain yourself to anyone. Not anymore." She finally looked at him then. Her eyes, so often guarded and wary, were open, vulnerable. And in that moment, under the falling snow, Julian wasn't a CEO or a millionaire. He was just a man who saw her, truly saw her. And for the first time, she allowed herself to be seen. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across Central Park. Elara pushed a stroller along a snow-clear path, Noah bundled and fast asleep. The gentle hum of the city felt oddly peaceful until a voice, sharp and familiar, cut through the tranquility. A voice she hadn't heard since the day her life fell apart. Elara, her blood ran cold. She turned. There, standing near a bench, was her mother. The same impeccable posture, the same expensive coat, the same cold, unreadable eyes. Elara's breath hitched. Her mother's gaze flickered to Noah, then back to Elara, her expression a mask of barely concealed disgust. "You should not be here," her mother said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Not in public. Not like this." Elara remained silent, her jaw tight. "You chose your shame," her mother continued, each word a shard of ice. "Do not expect to find love here." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement, disappearing into the anonymous crowd. Elara stood frozen, not shocked, just hollow. That night, the penthouse was quiet, save for the crackling of the fireplace. Elara had been withdrawn since she returned. She fed Noah, bathed him, and tucked him into bed. Now she sat in a corner of the living room, lost in a sea of painful memories. Julian was upstairs on a call, but Lily was still awake, coloring near the tree. "Look, Elara," Lily said, holding up a piece of paper. "It's your house." Elara looked over. In Lily's small hands was a watercolor painting Elara had done days earlier but hadn't shown anyone. It was a small, cozy cottage, warm light glowing from the windows, snow blanketing the roof. In front of the house stood 4 figures: Elara, Julian, Lily, and baby Leo, all holding hands beneath a tall Christmas tree strung with golden lights. Lily pointed to each figure. "That's me. That's baby Leo. That's Daddy. And that's you." She beamed up at Elara, her belief absolute. "This is our family now, right?" Elara couldn't speak. A burning sensation filled her throat. Her chest ached, but it wasn't a familiar ache of pain or loneliness. She crossed the room and knelt beside Lily, pulling both the little girl and the drawing into a fierce embrace. She held Lily tightly, her hand shaking as she pressed a kiss to her forehead. Then she reached for Leo's blanket from the nearby stroller, hugging it close, her heart overflowing. And for the first time, she wept, not tears of rejection or sorrow, but tears of belonging. In this quiet, firelit room, she was finally home. A few moments later, Julian entered the room. He stopped, taking in the scene. Elara on the floor, holding his daughter, her shoulders trembling. The painting lay beside them, the firelight glinting off the wet tracks on her cheeks. He walked over slowly and crouched down, resting a hand gently on hers. "You've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said softly. "It's okay to let someone else help you carry it now." Elara looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed, but a small, watery smile gracing her lips. And in that single, profound moment, the dynamic between them shifted. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was a recognition of two fractured souls who had known profound loss, and who, for the first time in a long time, realized they didn't have to face it alone. The storm hit hard and fast that night, a blizzard that blanketed the city in a thick, silent shroud of white. The peace within the penthouse was shattered by a soft whimper. Elara rushed to the nursery. Leo was restless, his small body twitching. His cheeks were flushed a deep, alarming red. When she touched his forehead, her heart plummeted. He was burning up. "No," she whispered, lifting him. His body was limp and terrifyingly hot. His eyes fluttered but wouldn't open. "Leo, baby, look at me." Panic clawed at her throat. She fumbled with the thermometer. 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit. A gasp escaped her lips. "Julian!" she screamed, her voice cracking with terror. He was there in an instant, a high-stakes video call with Tokyo investors completely forgotten. The look on Elara's face stopped him cold. "He's burning up," she sobbed, her voice shaking. "He won't wake up, Julian. I don't know what to do." Julian took one look at Leo's limp form and didn't hesitate. 10 minutes later, the Aston Martin was tearing through deserted, snow-choked streets of Manhattan. Julian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. In the back, Elara cradled Leo, whispering his name like a mantra. "Please, baby, please stay with me." Lily had been left with a frantic Mrs. Finch. Julian hadn't even bothered to cancel the meeting. He had simply tossed his phone aside and said, "Tell her my family needs me." The hospital waiting room was a cold, sterile purgatory. A nurse whisked Leo from Elara's arms, and her knees gave out, collapsing into the nearest chair. Michael stood watch, his eyes fixed on the pediatric team working over the tiny crib. He heard a soft sigh beside him. Elara had succumbed to exhaustion, her head tilted, dark circles stark against her pale skin. He gently draped his coat over her shoulders and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. He knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he whispered. "And so is he." He walked into the room and sat beside the crib. The machines beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm. He reached out and took Leo's tiny hand in his. It fit perfectly. He sat like that for hours, a silent, steadfast guardian. The billion-dollar deal he had missed never once crossed his mind. It didn't matter that Leo wasn't his by blood. He was his by choice. Hours later, Elara stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Her gaze fell upon the scene before her. Julian, asleep in a hard plastic chair, his head resting against the wall, one hand still protectively covering Leo's. She covered her mouth, silent tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear, but of overwhelming gratitude. For the first time since Leo was born, someone had stayed. The days after Leo's fever broke felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. He was back to his babbling, smiling self. The hospital stay had shaken Elara to her core, but it also solidified something beautiful and undeniable. Julian had stayed. One crisp morning, she stood in the kitchen, her voice calm and resolute. "I should start looking for work." Julian looked up. "You don't have to rush." "I want to," she replied, her quiet strength shining through. "I need to earn my way." He nodded, recognizing the unshakable core of her. Elara didn't survive by depending. She survived by standing on her own 2 feet. 2 weeks later, he took her to a small art gallery on the Upper East Side. The sign above the door read, "Vance and Company, Art Studio." "Vance," she whispered. "Just go in," he said with a smile. Inside, every piece of art hanging on the walls was hers. And there, under a single dramatic spotlight, was the painting of him and Lily under the Christmas tree. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I remember what you said," Julian replied, "that you wanted to share what you see. So I bought this place. It's yours." "Julian, I can't accept this." "You already did," he said gently, "every time you picked up a pencil." That evening, the gallery was filled with people. Elara stood in the corner, overwhelmed. Julian stepped forward. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice commanding the room. "It's not every day we get to witness something so rare. Not just talent, but true heart." He turned to Elara. "This is Elara Vance, the artist, the mother, and the woman who reminded me what it truly means to love." A profound silence filled the room, then erupted into thunderous applause. Tears streamed down Elara's cheeks, tears of recognition, of belonging. Later that night, long after the guests had departed, they stood alone in the gallery. "I meant every word," he said. She turned to him, her heart full to bursting. He stepped closer. "You gave when you had nothing. You built a home for your son out of sheer will. You reminded me how to feel." "Why me?" Her voice was a bare whisper. He smiled, a warm, steady light in his eyes. "Because you never asked to be seen, but you let me see you anyway." And this time, when she leaned into him, it wasn't with fear or hesitation. It was with love. It was with trust. It was home. It was Christmas Day, exactly 1 year later. The backyard of the Croft home was a winter wonderland. A long table was set with art supplies. Lily had insisted that this Christmas, they would paint memories. Michael sat beside Elara, a warm blanket over their laps. Leo, now a sturdy toddler, sat between them, giggling as he smeared blue paint on his fingers. Lily was concentrating on a drawing of a house with 4 stick figures. "Are we a family now?" Lily's voice was soft, but it echoed with the weight of the past year. Julian looked at Elara, at Leo, at the little girl who had unknowingly changed all their lives. He pulled them all closer. "Forever, my little star," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Forever." As the sun set, casting a golden glow across the snow, the 4 of them stayed close. For broken pieces, one scattered across the city, had found each other, and now they fit together perfectly. Together, they were painting a picture of home, a testament that sometimes a single act of kindness can build a family.